Welcome, everyone. This is CIPR International's annual general meeting for 2020. So a warm welcome to all our members and prospective members too. This is our first ever AGM held online, so bear with us. We'll try to be as good online as we are in person. But despite the fact that we are online, we try to keep our tradition of connecting our official AGM with a panel discussion, and this time about a very strategic aspect of our profession. The event today will be divided into two sections. The first will be our AGM with the chairs and the financial report and our voting procedure to elect our committee members. And once that's done, we will give way to our panel discussion entitled Reputation Matters, chaired by our special advisor and committee member, Eva Maclaine. But before we start, let me remind you some of the housekeeping rules. So today's event is being recorded and will be available at the CPD letter for members. And now I ask all CIPR International Group members, but only them, to keep your cameras on because we will need to see you while voting. So the official part, the first part, is planned to last for 10-15 minutes only to leave more room for the panel discussion. And once we finished with the AGM, I ask you all to switch off your cameras, except the panelist and the chair, to let all panel members remain on the first page of the Zoom window. And last but not least, if you do CPD, which I hope you all do, then do not forget to log this event because it's worth 5 CPD points. And now let's jump into the chair's report. Honestly, there is no question that this year is one of, if not the most challenging in decades. What we faced in spring reminded me of Maslow's hierarchy of needs in our profession, because from the bottom up, we faced challenges such as at the lowest level, how to meet the basic needs, to eat, how to do sports with lockdowns and restrictions. Then beyond that, we were able to fulfill expectations as a workforce. So how to work from home, how to manage less live and more online meetings, etc. The third level is how to maintain financial stability, to keep your job, to get work for yourself, for your employees, for in-house teams. And then the top level is how you support your overall profession if you serve or volunteer for a professional or a membership body, which we all volunteers do. So we faced all these challenges and sometimes we did right, but sometimes we failed, of course. And as per our profession, we also faced some difficult challenges and great opportunities at the same time. We basically no longer have to convince our clients and brands that we all have to communicate with all of our stakeholders constantly and all the time. Second is without a purpose and the commitments, it will be really difficult to engage with them. Thirdly, we all make mistakes and fail sometimes as individuals, as teams, and as brands as well. And that is just fine. We have to admit that. The next is crisis communication is more about preparation than firefighting. And last but not least, the globalization and the localization is happening at the same time. But if we turn from a broader view to the CIPR International, let us see what we achieved over this unprecedented year. So we did some lobbying success because more and more services of the CIPR went online and is accessible to members, including our hundreds who are based overseas. There was a massive shift in CIPR's approach to global outreach. All trainings went online, the chartership assessment went online, and the Influence magazine is available in digital format. All our committee meetings are held online, which means it's more accessible to overseas members to engage with either the group or the committee work. We introduced the bi-weekly newsletters to all members. Also, we launched an Instagram channel. With the Mauritius network is still being strong, but we are expanding to Africa with the support of African Communication Week. We organized webinars to reach out to our group can offer them. And since the chartership assessment went online, more and more of our overseas members, actually including myself, got chartered. So today, around 6 and 8% of our group membership and around 1/4 of our committee members are chartered, which I'm really, really proud of. This is a great number. And last but not least, our group was represented at the CIPR Council and also the CIPR board level. But we did some failures as well. So what we have failed with is we used to do well with organizing live events in London, but we weren't able to organize as many online. We couldn't grow our international network significantly. For example, the Swiss chapter is still not very active despite Faria's efforts, and we haven't been able to set up our presence in Latin and Central America. We still haven't been able to engage as many group members in Twitter and in LinkedIn group discussions. And despite all of our efforts, we weren't able to launch our Young Global Communications Award to recognize the young, enthusiast, and great professionals who have just entered our industry. So hence, we launched a survey, and the link will be copied into the chat box very soon. Please do fill it out. We would like to know what you like in your membership and how we can do better to keep you engaged. And based on that, we will renew our strategy by the end of the year. So to sum up, I would like to thank all committee members to keep our group running. I'm sorry to see some committee members leaving, especially Murati, who had done a great job with communications for years. And I also would like to thank CIPR head office to quickly shift it into the new normal. And despite all struggles, they went completely digital. They could grow the membership, and they kept providing excellent service and support to our groups as well. So that was the chair's report, and now let's see the finances. And as you might think and hope, it is going to be very short, as we didn't have live events this year. So this very brief summary was prepared by Stuart Graham, our treasurer, and I'm quoting, saying that financially, the CIPR International team have adopted a COVID situation well. We haven't incurred any costs to date in 2020, as we adapt to our practices predominantly online forums. Therefore, we remain in a cash surplus and expect to do so for the remainder of the year. In figures, that means there was absolutely no receipts in, no payments out, so we are net zero in that sense. And that was the financial report. And now let's get to the final part of the AGM, the voting ballot. This year, well, as a tradition, so to say, all our committee members who put themselves forward to positions are unopposed. So we won't need to decide, but only to vote them or us in. And I will, the way it's going to look like is I will tell the positions, then the name of the candidate, and then I need someone to raise their hands to propose and 1 to second. So it's going to be very quick and easy. I hope so. So for the chair position, the candidate is Andrei Stanislav, myself, and I need someone to propose. I see Shirley, thank you. And then someone seconding.
Beatrice.
Beatrice, thank you. So for the vice chair position, I'm proposing Beatrice Giribaldi. And I need someone to second. Eva, thank you. For the secretary position, we have a candidate, Margarita Kukla-Kinuturu, and I need someone to propose. I see Beatrice's hand.
Beatrice, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm happy to second. So that's myself. For the treasurer, I again propose Stuart Graham, and I need someone to second. Maggie, thank you. And now the group members will be voted in groups. So for the group number 1, including Eva Maclaine, Shirley Collier, Samantha Seewoosurrun, and Alessandra Pliquero, I need someone for this group to propose.
Beatrice, I'm proposing.
Thank you. And someone to second.
Margarita.
Margarita, thank you. So for committee member group 2 is Jason McKenzie, Jared Fershur, Sudha Singh, and Crispin Thorold. So I need a hand. I see Samantha proposing.
I'll second.
And Eva seconding, thank you. And we have 3 co-opted members, Faria Mirza, Balin Brunner, and Susan Simons.
Shirley's waving her hand.
Yeah. I hope I can see Shirley's hand. Yes, I can see Shirley. Thank you. And I am very happy to second those committee members. So thank you. That was the voting. It was quick as we expected. And so welcome the new committee. And thank you all for taking part of the CIPR International's AGM in 2020. The official part is done. So I'm handing over the microphone to Eva Maclaine, the past chair of our group, my mentor personally, to chair this wonderful and hopefully thought-provoking panel discussion we put together for you about reputation. And I also welcome Polly Wilkins, Samantha Seewoosurrun, and Tony Langham as panelists. Eva, the virtual floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra. Thanks very much. Could I ask all of you who are not speaking on the panel debate to mute yourselves and stop your videos so that everybody just basically has the panelists on their screen at the top. There's a couple more still left who haven't muted themselves. We've got, okay, right. Well, that's great. First of all, good evening, hello, warm welcome to every one of you. I think we've got an absolutely fantastic debate lined up for you all. And especially warm welcome to many of the people I know who are here from all parts of the earth. So some are based in Canada, our new committee member, in fact, China, Eastern Europe, Switzerland and Africa. It's absolutely great to see every one of you and all the others, many of whom I count amongst my friends, I think I've noted in the audience. So just a short introduction on the panel. I'm Eva Maclaine. I specialize in strategic communications and in particular in reputation issues and stakeholder management. I'm a CIPR board director, as Andras mentioned, and the past chair of CIPR International. We are really, really fortunate to have a first-class, very high-powered and knowledgeable panel tonight. So Samantha Seewoosurrun. Samantha's been a member of CIPR International committee for a couple of years now, I believe. And she set up a most fantastic network in Mauritius, which is really going great guns. So we're all absolutely thrilled with it all. It's a great pro forma for other countries to get involved in. And she's worked across the corporate, financial and government communications in Mauritius, Africa, and also internationally. Tony Langham. Tony is Chief Executive of Lansdowne's, and he's advised governments and organisations on their image and reputation for the last 30 years. And who better to talk about reputation than Tony? He published a book called Reputation Management, The Future of Corporate Communications and Public Relations. Now, many of us will have worked with lawyers throughout our careers in public relations. So we're particularly fortunate to have Polly Wilkins here today to cast the legal spotlight on many of the issues that we've got. Polly, a principal of Cobra and Kim, develops cross-border litigation and reputation management strategies to mitigate risk, reputational risk and business risk. And she represents ultra-high net worth individuals and in allegations of fraud and misconduct. Okay, so let's start. I thought we could kick it off with a fairly general question to understand better whether reputation is reality or is it perception. People sometimes talk about the various models in reputation management, and management thinker Peter Drucker actually is often quoted as saying you can't manage what you can't measure. So are there any specific models that you use in your work, reputation models? And is measurement actually important? And then last, do you find toolkits useful? So Tony, I think, can you kick us off as you wrote the book? I think you could start this one off, please.
I will, and thank you, Eva, and thank you and welcome everybody to tonight. I feel you pushed me on toolkit when we were rehearsing, Eva, and I feel I remember the Alexei Sayle joke from the 1980s that anyone who uses the term workshop but doesn't work in light engineering is and I won't say the word, and I feel a bit the same about toolkits. But to start where you started, in the world of reputation, perception is of course reality, because it is other people's perceptions that matter. You don't own your own reputation, other people own it. I've found over the last few years that I have used models and different academic approaches useful in my work. So the definition of reputation by John Dawley, which is that it's owned by other people. Most organizations have 8 key audiences. You have to measure reputation in order to be able to manage it. And it's people's views of your performance, your behavior, your communication, and that's kind of multiplied by their sense of authenticity and whether you're being authentic, and as we would say today, living your purpose. So I have found those models useful. I use that in my work with clients. Also with my work with clients, I will use other models that organizations can have a character and a capability reputation. I use examples like VW. I mean, no one doubts VW's capability to produce cars, but they doubt their character because of what happened over emissions in the United States. So I use that as a model. So I have moved to, I don't know whether the word toolkit is something I would use, although there is one in my book that I've produced. But I think the key thing about reputation is that, yes, you can have a model. It's a circular model. You measure it, you understand it. You produce gap analysis based on how you want to be seen as an organization and think you should be seen. You then produce behavior and communication programs to address those needs, and then you measure again, and the whole process is circular. So I do think a model is possible. I do think academic disciplines have something to say to us as practitioners, but I'm a bit agnostic about marketing jargon like workshops and toolkits.
That's great. Thank you very much, Tony. Lovely answer, very full answer. Polly, I know you're a lawyer, so you may not have so much to add to this, but do come in on this question if you like. I'm sure you've got something to say on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be invited to join this fabulous panel and speak with you all this evening. Definitely, Eva, I think just picking up on the last part of your question about toolkits and whether they're useful. I think that we all have our own approaches to strategy, and sort of picking up on Tony's point, whatever you call it or however you identify it in your own mind or within your own organization, fundamentally there are these key steps that I will always consider in a case that comes across my desk. And sometimes, it's not necessary to use the whole gamut of tools that are available. And in some circumstances, the toolkit can only get you so far. But I think ultimately, what we must do is carefully select those key pieces of the toolkit to propose to a client on a case-by-case basis. And also, in these more testing times, fundamentally depending on the terms of costs and how much it's going to cost them to utilize these aspects of the toolkit. And for me, the most important element when I'm putting together this sort of reputation management plan is to tailor it to a specific client and the specific situation that they find themselves in. So looking at it sort of as the interloper on this panel, as the lawyer from a legal point of view, this will involve me, for example, looking at the situation the client's in or their businesses are in and thinking about, would it help to combine the legal strategy with, say, an independent expert, always, a public relations firm and the strategy that goes with that, a search engine optimization firm, a business intelligence firm, and importantly, the client themselves. So for me, that's what I see as sort of the overarching toolkit. And then, as I said, it depends on the specific situation and how much the client wants to spend on the particular matter and what they need from their particular fact pattern.
Excellent, thanks very much. I should have pointed out actually at the beginning of all this that we are going to have questions at the end. I'm hoping to allow enough time. If you've got any questions, then do put them in the chat box. And I'm hoping either I or Beatrice between us will be able to notice them and pick you up on them. But do put them into the chat box if you've got any. Okay, so moving on to the next question that we have. It was claimed, I think it's actually by Ian Wright, who was then at Diageo, that there is no such thing as a global reputation. There's only a conglomeration of local reputations. Well, it seems to me that whilst an organisation's messages need to align with each other wherever you are in the world, that's clearly very important. But also they need to be countered by a sensitivity to local customs, local habits, local behaviours. And I just wondered how you all felt about that. Samantha, can we start off with you on this one?
Absolutely, Eva. Well, thank you first of all for the kind invitation. It's a pleasure to be in such good company on this panel this afternoon. So to come to the question, Eva, I think for brands like consumer products, if you're a household name like Coca-Cola or Unilever, that you probably can achieve a global reputation around the world. I mean, Coca-Cola, for example, is campaigning on a world without waste. You have Unilever looking at sustainable living on waste and packaging, sustainable resourcing, empowerment of women, and clearly they're not alone in this. But if you're an international institution with recognized credibility like the UNDP, again, you can probably have a global reputation. But on the institutional side, I think it's interesting to look at the European Union, because on the one hand, it claims to be the most successful peacetime project in history, but at the same time, it also has a bad reputation in other quarters. Because I think if we ask somebody on the streets of the UK about Brexit, that they'll probably not be very happy with the EU and consider that it doesn't have a good reputation. Also, if we'd walk down the road in the Caribbean, well, I mean, there you have both the Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago, both of which are on 2 EU blacklists on money laundering and tax evasion. So I don't think that they would be, presenting the EU in a very favourable light. So, so my view overall about governments is it's very difficult to have a global reputation because you're always going to be seen through that local prism.
Excellent. Yes, very true, Samantha. Thank you very much. Tony, do you want to add something to this?
I do. I'd also like to. It's great to hear Ian Wright mentioned in this context, because I consider his work at Diageo, where he had a reputation aligned to the performance scorecards, obviously with the approval of the board of the company in individual countries, is a great signpost for how you actually make reputation real and deliverable. So great to hear him mentioned. And I think the straight answer to the question is you don't have a global reputation because unless all countries and peoples in the world are the same, they own your reputation and they will have different perceptions. And Samantha's examples are all excellent, and I think there are many others. So I don't think you have a global reputation. It is a collection. However, I'm drawn towards the side of our industry that's fastest growing, whether you call that employee engagement or you call it cultural alignment or change programs, or even internal communication. I'm drawn to that side of our business, which says that reputation is about behavior, so behavior comes from the inside out. And that would say that an organization based in 60 countries in the world should come from the same place in their heart and their soul and their behaviors and their view of things. And they should understand what's required of them for their organization, what their organization's purpose is, whether they're aligned with it, what the organization's values are. And I think if we think of ourselves as a cultural alignment person, or as I say, or a purpose-driven person, we should believe that these global programs that encourage a similar purpose-driven approach from the same company's employees in 60 countries in the world, that is an attainable, possible thing, and we should strive for that. And that's really one of the futures of our industry, and it's one of the fastest growing parts of our industry. So I think I'd counter with that should be possible, consistent behaviours to a degree across the world from people in the same organisation.
That's great. Yes, that's an area which really interests me. Working internationally, I think it's fascinating to look at all the different cultures and how we do align our messages in spite of all of that. Polly, can you come in on this one, please, at this stage?
Yeah, absolutely. So my response to this is probably sort of from the viewpoint of acting for individuals. And I think when I consider the question, I think it's really interesting because my initial reaction was, well, of course there's such a thing as a global reputation, particularly where you have a client or there's an individual who is very well known in many, many jurisdictions around the world. And so the inclination is, yes, you know, they have a global reputation. But then actually, when you break it down a little bit, even those individuals, even if they're well known in many, many jurisdictions, there's still many jurisdictions where they're not known at all. And so identifying people or entities that truly have a global reputation, I think is actually quite narrow. So, you know, you've got everyone's favorite president, Donald Trump. He's probably, you know, as close to global reputation as you're ever going to come. Goldman Sachs, Harry and Meghan. I think apart from those type of brands, having sort of a global reputation is actually quite difficult. And I was actually surprised when I came to this conclusion. And I think that it is actually a cluster of local reputations, even if it's across a number of jurisdictions. But one element that I think is actually drawing us away from this cluster of local jurisdictions towards a global reputation are functions like due diligence reports. So, for example, you've got an individual who, you know, wants to engage with a bank or an institution or a business, whatever it may be, in a particular place. And the first thing that anyone is going to do, by and large, is, you know, pull up a World Check report or some kind of compliance report. And, you know, within a second, the person in that particular jurisdiction has drawn from Reuters and, you know, the other AI tools that they use information about this individual. So wherever you are in the world, you can get a snapshot of this person, whether it's accurate or not, you have some information. So I think I actually leave sort of slightly leaning towards global reputation as a result of these type of tools that are now available globally.
Oh, excellent. All right, thanks very much. The next subject that we're going to be discussing is reputation and ethics, which is always, as Joe Fawkes said, Professor Joe Fawkes said, it's a very messy subject. And I think it was Lord Bell who said there are two sides to every story and you have to handle it. So your side is prevalent. I don't know whether they're considered risky clients. They're only risky if what you're trying to promote is an idea that isn't sound. So I suppose the question is, does everyone deserve counsel in this court? And I'm thinking here in particular of the Hong Kong government, for example, that very controversial client. They offered a 7-figure sum for fees to do their public relations, the government's public relations. And apparently, according to Holmes' report, very many companies actually withdrew their tenders or never declined to tender in the first place. And one needs to look no further than Bell Pottinger, in fact, or companies such as the one that was hired to defend Saudi Arabia after the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. And PR companies are often accused of acting unethically and papering over the cracks. So should we accept dubious clients? You know, one can think of tobacco companies, arms, people, fossil fuels, you know, big sugar, and dubious governments. Does everyone deserve PR representation in the court of public opinion? Polly, I think I'd like to start with you as a lawyer. You may have a slightly different perspective on this. So perhaps you could tell us how you approach these matters.
Yeah, gladly. So I think the starting point for me is always that, or at least, you know, from the legal point of view, the importance of the right to a fair trial and the importance of the presumption of innocence is fundamental, you know, to any society and to maintaining the rule of law. And I think that's a very important starting point. And it may be that, you know, ultimately a law firm or a business makes a decision that they don't want to take on particular type of clients, you know, clients who might be involved in allegations of, you know, serious sexual offences or something like that. It may just be a flat, this isn't the work that we want to be doing. And ultimately that's a decision of the partners and of the business in terms of what type of work it wants to be undertaking. But fundamentally, every client that is onboarded, you have to ensure that you've carried out thorough due diligence and KYC or enhanced due diligence, whatever the case may be. And, at the other end of the scale, if you've got clients who have issues relating to sanctions, ensuring that you have been authorized and you have a license to do the specific bit of work that you are permitted to do in respect of clients who are in that category. So I think once you've satisfied yourself that you can get over those very important hurdles and worked with your compliance team and everything else, then you can continue with that work with the very important eye to getting detailed instructions and always being aware of what you do know and also what you don't know, and asking questions, getting material, getting supporting evidence from clients before you start putting their narrative into the public domain. But once you've got all of that information, they're entitled to a defense and they're entitled to have their story put out there, whether it's through a court or through the media or some other means. So that's really my point on it, Eva.
Excellent, thanks. Very interesting. I don't know, but Tony, do you want to come in on this? Are we advocates, or does every organisation deserve representation in PR? What do you think?
Well, I believe in dialogue, and I believe if the world is in dialogue, it's a better place to live in. So personally, I prefer Russia explaining its policy in Syria, or the side it backs in the Libyan civil war, or Saudi Arabia explaining what it's doing in Yemen. And I prefer communication and talking than none whatsoever. So I want organisations to be communicating. However, as individual firms and people, we certainly don't have to work for anybody, and we should have options. So my view on ethics as chief executive of Lansons is that we have an ethical committee. We look at clients and we decide whether as a firm we want to take them on. Now we turn down clients, and I can think of 4 significant opportunities in the last 2 years that we've turned down. We've turned down opportunities that I'll be very, very happy for other London-based firms. If I'm speaking as a British PR person, I'll be very happy for other London-based firms to take on, but they're not for us. But I do have some views on ethics. So the views that I have are additional views on ethics for all. So views on ethics for all are, it's not always who we work for, it's what we do. So you mentioned Bell Pottinger, Eva, and it wasn't that Bell Pottinger worked for the Gupta brothers that was the issue. It was that in London, marketing and design people developed a raise hate campaign for their fee, and that's what they produced. It was what they did. And we have surely an ethical standard about what we do, and that would cover all sorts of other areas as well. I believe that there should be an individual conscience clause in our industry, in that, and we have that at Lansons, that if Lansons has taken on a client that you personally wouldn't, and ours would always be in a grey area, but if we've taken on a client that you personally don't believe in, don't want to work on, then you can say so and you don't have to. So I think there should be an individual conscience clause. I think that's really important. And the other thing, probably my biggest belief, is transparency. And it is fundamentally wrong, I believe, to have taken money for an organisation and to be representing them, and to be, for instance, talking to a politician, and to conceal who you're working for and why you're asking the questions you're asking, and what information you're trying to get out of that politician or influencer. So transparency where it's possible. Sometimes if you're launching something new, clearly you can't be transparent until after you've launched it. But transparency, I think, is utterly crucial. And at Lansons, in fact, I went through the list today. Someone sent me my clients that have come in recently. Are you happy that these go on the website? And my answer was yes, yes, yes. Not that one, because it hasn't done that yet, and there's a clause saying that we can't mention them until that's happened. But yeah, so there are really clear ethical things that I think are absolutely black and white. Transparency, individual conscience, what we do, and the rest. I believe in dialogue, but we've got our beliefs and I really commend that everyone else having the same approach.
That's great. I won't push you to reveal which 4 you refuse, but I think that having individual ethical conscience for each employee is brilliant. I really think that's the way PR companies should go. It's very, very good example you set there. Samantha, what's your view on all of this? How should we represent everybody, anybody, or just?
Yes, thank you, Eva. Thank you. Well, I run a PR agency called Perpetual Motion, which is based in Mauritius. And I think the first question I would ask is, what is the benchmark that you're going to use when you're talking about an ethical government? So I'm happy to give a couple of examples. So first of all, Mauritius, where I am currently based, it's currently on the EU blacklist for money laundering, and it's also on the FATF grey list. So does that mean that I'm not able to work for the Mauritian government? That I personally would say not, because I believe that it should be, I think that those procedures are soon going to be resolved and those will be removed from those lists. If we look at the UK government, I mean, should the UK government be considered as the hallmark of ethics? I can give the example of a long-running territorial dispute, which is between Mauritius and the UK over the Chagos Islands in the Indian Ocean. And in this case, the UN General Assembly actually passed a resolution by a massive majority last year saying that the UK must immediately leave the Chagos Islands and give them back to the Mauritians. And that's been totally ignored by the UK government. So if you would ask a Mauritian on the streets, they'd say that the UK government is not at all ethical. So I think it's really a case where beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I mean, we could also look at, for example, the UAE. We've got Dubai Expo taking place now next year. I mean, UAE is incredibly innovative and successful, but it doesn't fit with the Western democratic ideal, let's say. So would you work for that government? I mean, then if we look across to Africa, which we're also part of in Mauritius, I mean, how do you determine if a particular incumbent president or an opposition leader is actually ethical? I mean, now we're in election season. We've already got lots of trouble on the streets in Guinea already. We've got elections coming up by the end of the month in Tanzania and in Ivory Coast. I mean, I know that there are huge opportunities on a rolling basis for international PR people to come into those countries across Africa and offer advice and support. So, I mean, I think it's really a case of trying to do as much due diligence as you can, talk to all sorts of people. I mean, on the one hand, as Polly pointed out, you can look at World Check and see what that tells you and look at some of those compliance elements. But I mean, you can get a hugely wide range of answers about what it's like doing business or dealing with government in a particular country. So, I mean, you can only do as much homework as you can and then go with your gut instinct. But I mean, the other thing that I would say is I'm a huge advocate of investment promotion. I mean, I really believe in the power of PR and investment promotion in particular to turn the country around. So I definitely wouldn't want to actually give up the opportunity of a particular country too quickly. I mean, one that also springs to mind currently is Rwanda. Well, I have a number of clients in Mauritius that have been to Rwanda and they said it's absolutely wonderful. They said the regulator is like one of the best they've ever seen on earth. And it's not widely known as a place where people would have necessarily wanted to go and do business. So, I mean, I think you really have to do your homework, keep on top of what is going on. And then from a PR standpoint, you really have to go with your gut instinct and based on all the information you have to eventually take the right decision.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, thanks very much. Also, I think we have to bear in mind that, we also have codes of ethics, which we subscribe to as members of the CIPR and the PRCA and Global Alliance and various other organizations. And we have to act within those codes. So that also may influence the way that we make our decisions, probably. Okay, moving on to, and if any of you the speakers want to sort of come back on anything, do feel free. It's meant to be a debate, so don't hold back by any means. So I'm moving on to this awful year that we've been having. I'd just like to ask the question whether there has been a real step change in our society this year. There seems to have been, and that people are sort of more keen on ethical behavior and acting the right way in society. So sustainability and climate change were already identified well before this year, actually, as the most pressing issue for companies to address. And nowadays, the ESG is, on every mouth, and it's bandied around as a sort of badge of honor if you do ESG. And I just wonder, do you think that this is all window dressing, just designed to appeal to the stakeholders? And have these beliefs really accelerated in 2020? So that's the sort of one issue for debate. And then the other one is, have we found this sort of new respect for society in the world, fueled by the young mainly, people like Greta Thunberg, obviously, and the students, or is it something that the world of business is pushing itself? So that's my opener. Samantha, you come in on this one.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Eva. Well, I'm now going to speak with my corporate and financial hat on, Eva. I personally don't see the ESG agenda being led by the young at all. I mean, what I actually see is that it's a high-level project. I mean, if we look at the UN Principles of Responsible Investing, I mean, it started with the UN and a group of the world's largest institutional investors. So, I mean, I don't think that Greta Thunberg, frankly, had anything to do with it. If you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, I mean, again, it's a top high-level project. And when we are now seeing from the financial community clearly, a huge growth in things like ESG funds. I can give one example of Fidelity. You've got a set of ESG funds on the thematic side. You have things like the Water Sustainability Fund. You have the Women's Leadership Funds, all to help economic empowerment, which are obviously all very noble causes. You also have integration of ESG factors into investment decision making, things like sustainability index funds. So you've got all of this going on. I mean, it's hugely all the rage at the present. But I mean, I personally, from a sort of commercial and PR perspective, I mean, although there may be some grassroots action going on at the lower levels, with sort of students and what have you, I mean, I just personally, from my own experience, don't see that is what is leading the charge. I think it's all led from the highest levels.
That's very interesting. You don't see any similarity to, say, the the environmental awareness that sort of really hit everybody in the 80s. I know it started a lot earlier, but by the 80s there were children telling their parents off for dropping litter in the street, and very often it's by teaching the young and to understand all the issues that maybe society does get that push to change. You don't feel that that's
well, I mean, I'd say, Eva, it's been I probably would accept there is a sort of a drip sort of effect over many years. But in terms of the actual ESG agenda now, very specifically, when it comes to ESG investing and funds, I mean, I do genuinely think that it all comes from a high level, and that is why it's made quite a lot of progress in recent years. I mean, it's not to discount all the efforts that are made at a low level, but I think the impact has come from here and not from here.
Lovely. Okay. Tony, do you want to come in now?
Yeah, I love Samantha's perspective, and I agree that what's pushing mass behaviour in let's take that industry, the investment industry, is the need to make ESG part of their DNA effectively by next March. So and led by that wonderful institution, the EU, of course, through MiFID. So I agree that is a sort of top down, but I think I'd view that a lot of that was a response to power generated. So Greta Thunberg is personally would be one of my heroes of the last 10 years, has a wonderful person, wonderful impact. And I think politicians that need to be voted in by people are looking ahead to their future voters and are responding partly to pressure from below and putting pressure on regulators. So I think that's sort of the push me, pull you. I do think this year is changing things, and I think combating inequality and combating the climate crisis alongside public health and just recovering the economy are the big issues. And I think societies, governments and people won't accept corporations and companies saying our job is just to run our business. I think people expect more from companies. Now, I'm not saying everyone wants to do it in their own lives. I don't see personally that people are stopping buying £3 t-shirts with hand embroidery on them or refusing takeaway cups in coffee counters. I don't see that's happening everywhere, or offsetting every time they take a flight. Before, obviously, we weren't allowed to take flights. I don't see behaviour is changing, but expectations are changing. And our position at Lansdowne is that we're advising companies that they have to deal and tackle with these things and engage with things even if they don't want to, and that's in their self-interest to do that because they want a better reputation and society is expecting more of them. and the bar's been raised, and companies have to step up, in my view, and this year has accelerated existing trends.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I think we shouldn't end on a sort of pandemic note. So let's end more positively and think towards the future, which I hope will be a lot lighter than this year has been. So what do you think is going to fuel the growth next year and through into the next decade? And what positive things can you think will be happening in your industries, in your area, which in where you operate? Polly.
I'm smiling because I'm not sure that I'm going to be particularly positive, and I might be a bit scary, but I think it's probably, at least from the legal point of view, I think it's the reality in terms of the type of work that I'm seeing. I think that there is an increase in relation to sanctions, especially as we've moved out of Europe and we have our own sanctions regime now, which is more robust than it was previously. And so I think a lot of individuals and entities are going to have to bear that in mind in terms of who they've been engaging with across the globe historically and at present and going forward, and ensuring that everything that they're doing is completely in compliance with these more robust rules. So I think that that's going to be become a feature for people where it may not have been previously. And I think across the globe, that there's as we've all seen with the Panama Papers, Paradise Papers, and the different iterations of this in terms of spotlight on citizenship by investment, all of those type of things. I think there will be increasing focus, as there should be, on movement of funds between jurisdictions. What we've talked about already, sort of due diligence and KYC, and making sure that everyone has got everything that they need in place to be able to run their businesses. So from my side, I think we will be seeing more of that. I mean, the positive spin on it is that the effect of that is a lot more transparency. People know who they're doing business with. People know who sort of are underneath all the companies that they're doing business with, and it's important that all of that is driven forward. So from my side of things, probably not as positive as you're looking for, Eva.
All right. Samantha, can you address the balance a little bit?
Well, I'll try, Eva. I'll certainly try. Well, on the contrary, I'd say I'm extremely excited about the future, in fact, Eva. So I mean, here in Mauritius, I'm both working on the PR side, but also in the publishing industry. So we're working both on the side of print and online publishing. I mean, I think it's online publishing that excites me the most in terms of opportunity. Because I mean, I run the platform called platformafrica.com, which is covering a range of African countries, well, the whole of continents, in fact. So I mean, here I'd say that since COVID first hit in March, particularly in places like Mauritius, where we had a total lockdown, where even the supermarkets were closed for 14 days. So you literally couldn't leave the house. Even if you'd been buying a newspaper your entire life, you would be an imprisonable offence to even leave the house, never mind to go and buy a newspaper. So I mean, I think that there's been a tremendous shift in habits. So I think for online media and for online communication, that we're now, there's now no going back, frankly. So I think that for now, if you want to get your communication across borders, that you've never had such a great opportunity as you have today. So that's the reason why I'm very excited about the future, Eva.
Very good. Although, I mean, I agree with you about the online stuff, but I am really, really hoping that next year we can actually have this meeting in a room and we can all say hello to each other, as well as having it online for people who can't make it. So that's very good. Tony, what are your sort of...
Yeah, I'm with Samantha, and I know Polly is as well, really. I mean, I'm hugely positive because kind of what else can you be? Because the past is another country. So let's go for the future. I'm in the sort of paraphrasing Lenin kind of zone, and that sometimes mostly decades of change take decades, but sometimes decades of change happen in years, and this is a year when a decade of change will happen. And it's to be decided or to be known whether that will be for the better or for the worse. But there's loads of reasons that it would be for the better. I mean, we embrace the change that we know has happened. So flexible working, we've all embraced that, and we know that's with us forever. I think we're stumbling with your last point that our world will be more virtual in future. Whatever we go back to, that will be a fact. And there are other things that we need to do. I'm really positive that business won't be allowed to be just business, as I was talking about. It will have to accept these wider responsibilities as part of just normal business in future. And a better world can only be delivered by businesses and individual people's behaviour. Governments can't deliver a better world because people go to work, they do their own things, they work in companies, and the companies help influence what they do. So I'm really hopeful on that basis. For our profession, we've been really important in this period, and whatever country you live in, you've seen that communication can save lives and can cost lives. Irrespective of this debate, whether we're reputation managers or not, communication can save lives and cost lives. And we've seen it in from good to bad from governments across the world. Inside organizations, we've been in the boardroom as a profession more than before. And we should keep that place as long as we modernize and we progress. And what we do, I think, divides into two essential things. It's reputation advice and consultancy and holistic advice at that level that makes a difference. And then in what used to be the consumer side, it's work that helps deliver sales, whether that's digitally or not, but it's heavily focused on digital, and that's how our industry is dividing. And we should embrace that and go forward. But the real reason I'm hopeful is this is just me as a person that has lived in London since I came from the Midlands in the early 80s. It seems to me as an old person that London has got loads better and looks better, and the choice of entertainment is better. Obviously, there are things like housing the affordability of housing that are worse. But while what's on offer to people in their lives has got better, people's level of satisfaction with their life and whether life meets their expectations has got worse. And I felt I was living in a city that was full of people having access to a wonderful city and wonderful experience that were always disappointed. And this year, hopefully, has shown us all that some of the things that we took for granted, and walking across Green Park or going to a restaurant of our choice or sitting in the theatre or going to a gig, that these things that we just took for granted and we were still disappointed, they're actually quite special. So my real hope is that we would calibrate our expectations and that we'll realise that we're actually quite lucky, and certainly those of us that live in London are quite lucky, would be my hope. And that's why I'm really hopeful.
Oh, that's very interesting. Very good point about living in London. I completely agree with you. I think it's a wonderful city. Okay, that is fantastic. I think we've covered a lot of ground. I'd like to open the session up to questions, and I don't know whether we've actually had any yet, but do please all switch your cameras on now. Perhaps keep on mute unless unless you're actually speaking, but otherwise, if you can all switch your cameras on, it would be lovely to see you and get a more participative sort of element to this debate.
Eva, let me jump in. I've been following the questions.
Oh, great. Okay.
I can ask a few of them.
Lovely.
So this question comes from Julia Romo, and I believe it was during the part of the debate where Tony was discussing ethics, transparency, and how do you pick your clients, essentially. So the point was, I do agree with Tony, some great points, but I have to raise a question about culture and the influence that it has in our ability to advise on reputation and perception issues.
Right, Tony, I think that one was aimed at you. Do you want to take us out of this view of speaker view? Just put us on panel gallery.
You happy for me to carry on, Eva?
Yes, do.
Yeah, so I decided about 5 years ago, I decided, or maybe it's a bit longer now, that that when people asked me what I did, none of my descriptions really fitted. So I changed to saying I help manage reputations. I think reputation management itself has connotations, but I changed to say I manage reputations. And I wanted to say that, and I wanted to tell the people in Lansons, and I wanted to express to clients that to really advise on reputation, we have to advise on, to quote the suffragettes who I love, deeds and words, actions as well as words. So I think I can only give advice to my clients if I advise on their behavior and their actions as well as their words. So their behavior comes from their culture. So if I interpret the question properly, I think that culture has a huge impact. People's set of values and view of purpose has a huge impact, and we can only do our job if that's part of our job. So I think, with clients that I'm confident with and I know well, I will say, if financial services is a great example where often the bonus can be 50% of pay in a year. If the bonus is 50% of pay, the actions that lead to getting the bonus will determine what many people do. And if they don't fit the values and purpose of the organisation won't live to its values and won't have a good reputation. And you can pretty much put all banks in that category over the last 30 years, and that's why they've failed. So I believe we broaden our canvas and we say advising on culture and behaviour is absolutely fundamentally part of our job. Deeds and words, as the suffragettes might have said.
Thank you. That was, I think, a very thorough answer, Tony. We've had another question come through, which is with regards to digital. Do you think digital has played a role in helping create global reputations, or of course damaging them more easily? I think
Well,
sorry?
Samantha can kick us off on that one, I think.
Yes, I mean, I think that's totally true. I mean, it is clearly the case that the power of social media going beyond borders, and it can either make you or break you at the speed of light. And I think it's, it's something that has changed tremendously, I'd say, even within the last 5 years. So, I mean, I think all of that sort of social media monitoring, having the right people to follow up, which are those medias, which are the tweets that you ignore, which are those which you think are going to take on a life of their own, where they need to be immediately handled and rebutted. I mean, I think for global organizations, they now just, well, I'm sure they are anyway, but they just have to be absolutely on it, because you just don't know where something's going to pop up in the corner of the world, which is unexpected, and then it is going to go absolutely viral within a matter of minutes. So, so I do agree that that either on the plus or the minus side, social media has been completely transformational.
I think it can actually be, I mean, it's an excellent point. I think it actually can be a question for Polly too, because I'm pretty sure that you're having to deal with a lot of requests with regards to defamation online, or problematic information being shared on Twitter, and as a law firm advising as well on reputation, I'm sure that you come across this issue quite regularly.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I think we all know social media, as Samantha has said, can be a force for good, but it also can create total carnage within seconds for a client. And so I've dealt with a number of situations where, frankly, you just feel like you're playing whack-a-mole. You get some of it down, and then it pops up on Reddit or wherever it may be. And so, but, the more that we all become accustomed to social media, I think that helps everyone manage it. And you know that there's certain types of social media that have got more followers or carry more weight or rank more highly, and then there's other forms of social media where you have someone sitting in their living room playing on their laptop trying to cause damage to somebody. So it needs to be factored in. People, at least on the sort of the reputation defense side of things, it really stresses people out, and it swiftly turns things into crisis mode. But usually, that isn't necessarily the key piece that you need to be focusing on. You need to be focusing on what is driving this story. Why is it out there? Why is it coming through social media? And sort of looking at it from a step back and dealing with that. I think, there are steps that you can take to get things taken offline from social media. Sometimes that is very complicated if you have to go to different courts in different jurisdictions to get a court order first. Anyone who's dealt with US social media platforms before will know very well that for them to do anything, you have to get a court order, and that takes a lot of time and money. So as I said, focusing on what is really going on and what is driving this can be, a better strategy.
I mean, that's an excellent point, because I think with regards to digital, it's sometimes hard to plan for how fast things can amplify across various different mediums. And actually, Clau Bell Lewis just followed up and said, I think with digital influence, the question could also be its impact on shifting perception. And the internet itself now has a reputation issue, and perhaps the reach of digital affects perceptions, but not as deeply. And only measurement and monitoring can determine the real dent on reputation. What do you think of that? Potentially one for Tony to follow up.
I'm happy to go. I mean, we're not really, we're still coping, I think, with a world where truth doesn't exist. And I think we haven't got there yet, have we? Reaching a situation where, and I guess we can name them because it's straightforward: Russia, China, North Korea, and anti-vax propaganda throughout the world has dissembled things to a position where to many people truth doesn't exist, and that's a huge subject that I don't think we've got to the bottom of. I think in the corporate space, though, we've seen some really interesting examples where we all have to think holistically when we advise our clients, don't we? And I just notice things occasionally so things that are not my clients. I noticed one of the times when Ryanair was particularly criticised in the last year for things that they've said. They didn't respond to media at all, but I just noticed through my history, I was literally deluged with emails around £9.99 flights for about 3 days after that. And I believe their response to reputational threat was to not go onto the Today programme and to try and debate with them, was just to say to the whole world, we're flying you around the world for £9.99, for God's sake. That was their response, and that effectively is their business. And I think in our advice, we have to think holistically in how we, in all techniques and all situations, and what we advise clients to use.
To follow up on actually the question of as well corporate reputation and messaging, Stuart Neal asked, much of the reputations we have discussed are about people as an entity or a company, which is also an entity. What are the approaches needed for industries and sectors versus individuals and entities? I don't know if someone who wants to pick this up in the panel.
I'm happy to go. Yeah, I'm happy to start. Maybe Samantha will have something to say as well, obviously, because she's a specialist in this area. I think sectors have found it harder lately to work together. I think it's a very dangerous move for many sectors. Government created the rules for how things work in lots of space, and what a government loves is if one half of a sector says one thing and the other half of the sector says another thing, and then government can say we can do whatever we want because the sector isn't coming to us with a consistent message. So I think sectors breaking apart in how they represent themselves to government has been a really dangerous trend for corporates, and you can see it in all sectors all over the world. On the other hand, I think take a sector like, what would we take, oil and gas? It's really, really hard, isn't it? Because what I would say from my knowledge of that sector, BP at a good end versus, and I won't name companies that are at an end that is not aiming for zero emissions by 2050 at all, or transformation at all. How does that sector portray itself differently? So some sectors have huge difficulty, but I think when they talk to government, they really have to be consistent. And Samantha, you'll know, because you've got experience of industry bodies and working with governments as well.
Well, absolutely. I mean, before I was in Mauritius, I actually used to work in Brussels for nearly 20 years, like representing industry associations of different sorts. And I'm always strongly an advocate of having the most united fronts that you can possibly have. We even see it now in Mauritius, where one of the financial trade associations that I work for is actually converging and merging with the other one. So I mean, have always been an advocate of a united voice for a sector, because I mean, otherwise you're just like shooting yourself in the foot, frankly.
Yeah. We've probably got time for one or at the most two questions now, because we really need to wrap this up at 7:15. We actually decided yesterday to extend this a little bit because we were due to finish at 7, but I'm really glad because we got a very lively conversation going. And there's a question from Kia Bell Lewis, that with digital influence, the question could also be that the impact.
Just ask that one, Eva. We've just ran through that one.
Oh, sorry, was that the one we've just done? Okay.
Yes, yes. Let me ask this one from Stu. What 2 lines of reputation advice would you give to Donald Trump right now as he deals with being behind in the polls? Anyone want to take this tough question? Go
Well, in fact, funnily enough, I also worked in the US in Congress. So the US election is something which is very close to my heart. I was actually there when George W. Bush was nominated in Philadelphia in 2000. I was actually in the crowd. But since the Republican Party has now moved in a direction that I find absolutely abhorrent, I mean, the advice I'd give to Trump to actually win, even if I wouldn't want him to win at all, but if I was going to be part of his team and say that you must win, I think what you need to do now is to actually go back to basics, go back to go back to those messages of how you were going to make America great again that worked so well for you the first time, because that's probably the best chance that you've got. And also trying to present something of a track record, because I think this is something that you practically never hear from Trump. He's always sort of the man of the moment, whether it's COVID, now he's caught it, he never wore a mask, that was his problem and all the rest of it. But I think that now it's like, what has he actually done for that first mandate? I think come back and tell the American people, there must be a few floating voters somewhere there wondering whether they can trust Biden or whether we're better off with, the incumbents. So I think I would say, what have you actually done? Present, 5 key points on what I've done in my mandate and ask for people to vote for you again. That's what I'd ask him.
Very good. Tony?
That's brilliant advice. All I would say is I think we've learned that he's a master tactician, and all of us in communication that have ever tried to do news, he's a master tactician from 23 years in reality TV, and he's still got it. But as Samantha's pointed out, he's been shown to not be a master strategist in this campaign, and he had to get back to job. He won because he talked more about jobs and security and family and protection than his opponent, and he's not doing it this time. So I'm with Samantha on the strategy. He's still a master tactician though, and as we see, he can still dominate the news. You see those charts about how many people search for his views versus search for Biden's views. He's a master tactician, but the strategy's not working.
Yeah, very good. Well, I don't suppose he will be listening to our advice.
Shame about that, Eva. Shame.
No, he hasn't joined just yet. I'm still checking.
Very good. Well, I think with that, a lovely final answer, I think we'll wrap this up. But I just want to say thank you very, very much to a really fantastic panel. I hope that everybody here enjoyed it as much as I did. I think the level was absolutely superb, and a lovely complement of speakers, I think, with all the different angles. So thank you very much again. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us. We're thrilled to have you here. I hope you come to more of our debates. We actually had a request to do another virtual pub quiz the other day, so we might look at that, but there are lots of things we do, and do have a look at CIPR International webpage, where we've got lots of blogs and all sorts of things on it. And this has been recorded, so I hope that we'll be able to make it available to any members who haven't been able to watch tonight because of, being in China or whatever, New Zealand, or, different types of our zones. So that's all. Remains me to thank you all very, very much. And perhaps, thank you to all the speakers. I'm sure it's reciprocated. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Eva.
Thank you
everyone.
very much.
Thank you, Eva.
Thank you.